All right. We are back. Another episode of the DollyWould podcast. My guest today is a recording and mixing engineer and also a badass guitar player. Had the pleasure to work with him over the last decade on quite a few different projects, ranging from Goodnight Ravenswood, Shane Hall, Kimmy Bitter. Those are just a few of the records I've done with him. And plays in a local outlaw country band called the Redheaded Strangers. Just absolutely kill it. Love every chance I get to see them. We had a great conversation diving into his career, cutting his teeth at the record plant, and finding his way into being an independent mixing engineer and the freedom that comes along with that. And overall it was a great conversation, a good hang. Just love these few hours I get to sit people down and just have a kind of dedicated one-on-one conversation. And I'm really enjoying this, and I hope you do too. So please welcome my next guest, Mr. Mike Butler. Super stoked to have you. Been a interesting season, so pivoting into something like this has been super cool because it's like there's not a lot of social interactions with so many people that
I know
you used to get them with, and so it's an exciting thing for me. And I say this probably every podcast at some point, but being able to like trap someone in here for 2 hours or whatever it is. And just have like a dialogue and dive into a lot of stuff. And I was thinking, which is cool, is so many people that I've done this with, at least at the beginning, are always like people that I know really well.
Right.
And so, which is like, okay, we're just gonna. And then obviously I've had a couple of people like, oh, I don't really know them at all. And then I was thinking about today, because my natural inclination and situation, like we know each other because we've worked together in different things over the years, and it's but it's cool. I went to go I was like, oh, maybe I should probably like look some more stuff up. So maybe I have some more. And I was like, I'd rather not.
Yeah,
almost.
good.
It's like, I'd love just to dive in and just kind of see. And it's like such a cool opportunity to have someone like, dude, we've done things, we've hung out, all those things, but never really like dove into.
Yeah. I mean, how often do you get to do that with somebody? It's
Right.
like really sit down and engage and have a conversation.
Right. Yeah.
If it's not in a loud bar and you're not
Right.
shit-faced or, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That's usually when these conversations happen, is at like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
when you should be in bed.
Right. Well, and a lot of our interactions too have been in the studio where
we got work to do and shit.
On someone else's dime.
Yeah.
So it's like one of those like, oh, okay, cool. Well, I guess I should go do another take now.
Yeah.
But so Mike is mixing and recording engineer. I've worked with him in projects in the past. First one was Goodnight Ravenswood back at Lost Ark.
Oh yeah.
A long time ago. It's when we first kind of met, and then did stuff with Shane Hall and Kimmy, and you mixed Hollander's record.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to get into kind of the nitty gritty of like how you got to where you are now and kind of early musical upbringings. And
yeah, I mean, it's gone a lot of different paths, that's for sure. But I think, like most people that do what I do, they started out as musicians and just started out playing in bands and stuff. And then for me, I was playing, when I really started recording and stuff, I was in a band. I was living in Arizona, and I was in a band that got signed to Mercury Records. Wow. And it was in the 90s, in a time when they were basically signing anything, seeing what sticks. Gin Blossoms had just come out of Tempe, Arizona, and we were there. And so they were like, maybe it's the next Seattle. And they just signed every band in town. And then we got signed on a 3-song demo, I think. And we had like 30 songs. And so for them, they were talking about sending us to a studio to record demos for everything. And we were like, why don't you just give us some stuff and we'll figure it out. One of the guys in the band had some experience with studios. And so they agreed to buy us, use some of the budget, and we got some ADATs and a Mackie board, like when that was hot.
Yeah.
And built in our practice space pretty similar to this, actually. Just built a little control room and got enough stuff that we could start demoing all our own shit out. So we did that for a while, and then as like record deals go, like you sit around a lot and wait.
Hurry up and wait
for them to figure out what they want to do with you or when you can get in the studio. And so we're sitting around doing nothing really, and I just started recording all my friends' bands. So hey, I've got a studio now, like just come hang out. And that's when I really started getting into how to actually record. Yeah. Even though it was on ADATs and stuff, like I wasn't making real records, but I started getting the bug for it.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that you brought up ADAT, because I was just listening to the podcast today with Rick Rubin and Dave Cobb.
Oh yeah, I heard that. That's a great one.
They were talking about that. Probably it sounds like it's right around the same time.
Yeah, probably.
And going down the whole ADAT, and I actually have no idea what that is.
Oh, so ADATs were basically an 8-track digital recorder that used VHS tapes to record onto.
Oh shit!
And so, because a VHS tape is just a digital tape.
Yeah.
And so you could format it. You could link up to 3 of them, so you could have 24 tracks of digital recording, but you'd have 3 VHS tapes that you'd format for them and sync. They would sync up together. Huh. But you'd have to label them properly, or else you'd never fucking put your record back together. Yeah, and in the 90s, that was it. Like that was the pinnacle of home recording and sort of consumer recording possibilities. And in fact, a ton of records. I think I remember reading like Jagged Little Pill was done on all ADATs, and shit like that they were making real records with them. They sounded awful, but early digital shit, just sounded really, didn't sound great. But a lot of records in the 90s were made on them, and that's how we got started. And then a Mackie console is, 24 channel console, and we just send tracks out to the ADAT things, and that was it.
Trip.
And mix it down. We had a DAT thing to mix down to. And
okay.
I just figured out how to record and mix that way.
Yeah.
Very limited. I think we had like 2 reverb processors. One was probably a pedal, and the other one was like one cheap rack thing. And that was it.
Yeah.
And, figuring out how to make shit. Like we didn't have proper overhead mics, but we had these PZM mics that were like, are meant to go on the floor or whatever. We just taped them to a piece of cardboard that would kind of sit over the drum set, sort of vaguely stereo. But it all worked,
That makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah.
About what
it
I
was
trying
great.
To do.
And then, so I did that for quite a while, and then really started getting into it and wanting to do it for real. And that band and that record deal the deal went sour. We did get a chance to go to Ardent Studios in Memphis and make the record, which was amazing. And then, but it was one of those deals that just, the record never came out. We got dropped. And at that point, we were just sick of each other and hadn't written a song in a year. So we were like, fuck it. And we quit. And then I decided, I was like, I want to really pursue this thing. And so I called up the producer that we worked with in Memphis, and hey, can I get in and just, like go get food and clean bathrooms somewhere? And of course, like, he's like, yeah, come out to Memphis. I packed everything up and moved to Memphis, and then there was no job. So then I got there, and he was like, he wouldn't return my calls. And then I was like, living in I had a friend there, his girlfriend's mom's attic. Like she had an attic converted room that she let me stay in until, to figure out what the hell I was doing. I ended up getting a job in a deli, like just working like
this is not what I signed up for.
This sucks.
Yeah.
And then while working at that deli, somebody was like, I was telling my story of, how shitty everything was. And, and he's like, well, there's other studios in town, like Memphis. There's a million studios. Have you tried this one or this one? And I was like, oh, no, it never really occurred to me.
Yeah.
I only know the one guy at the one studio.
Yeah.
So I started calling around, and there was a studio, House of Blues studio in Memphis. It used to be called Kiva. It was a beautiful studio. And I called up, talked to this studio manager who was just frantic because he was so understaffed and didn't know. And he's like, can you come in today to interview? And I was working at the deli, and I was like, yeah, I'll take a lunch break. And went and talked to them, and they're like, yeah, I need somebody really bad. Like, I just need a runner. I need somebody to help out around here, like right now.
Yeah.
And I never went back to, like, I just called the deli and said, I'm not coming back to work. I
Oh,
quit,
man.
and just started right then and there.
Yeah.
And that was a great studio. And that was like total trial by fire. I was working on, like, all I knew was Mackie boards and ADATs. And this was like SSLs and Neves and full tape machines and nothing I had any idea about.
Wow.
And they had one assistant engineer that worked in 3 different rooms, and one other runner that was from Canada and couldn't work there legally and had to go back. Like, and so it was just timing. Like, I just got in, and then immediately they were like, okay, go assist this session. And I'm like, okay. And I blew up a ton of gear and just fucked things up, like patching shit in wrong, like patching one thing into the other. But there was, in downtime, like, I just stay there all night, and I just stayed around the clock in there just trying to figure it all out. Like, it was kind of pre-YouTube and Tape-Op magazine. So it was like, I was just kind of left to figure out, okay, this mic sounds like this. Like, you know, putting a friggin' $8,000 Neumann on a kick drum and blowing the capsule.
Oh, God.
I was like, that sounded great for like 45 seconds. And then, but like, you know, the owner lived in California and basically, it was a situation where I could just go, well, this thing broke. Yeah, I need to send it out to get it repaired.
Don't know what happened.
I have no idea. And so that's how I really got into real studio recording. And I was there a couple of years, and then met another guy who was from LA. This guy, Jean-Marie Horvat, who's like a big R&B mixer, was doing a project there. And they sort of rented out the whole studio. He was mixing in one room, and they were doing overdubs in another. And they ended up hiring me to track some of the overdubs. And we started talking, because I'd give him tracks across the hall or whatever, and we started building a friendship. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "You know, I'm just trying to survive." And he's like, "You got to be in LA. Like, you can't do this here. Like, if you really, really want to do it, you have to be in LA or Nashville or New York or somewhere. Like, you can't do it out of Memphis. There's nothing going to happen here." And so, you know, I thought about Nashville, but it was like, at the time, Nashville was very much a cookie cutter kind of situation. I'd been to Nashville a bunch of times, obviously living in Memphis, and hung out and saw a bunch of studios there. And just the way they did things, and it just didn't feel like the path I wanted to go down at the time. It was, you know, in the 90s, it was just like a factory. Yeah. Like, they didn't change patches. Like, you go into studios and be like, all the EQs are set and all the patches are set and everything is exactly the way it was for the last year and a half or however many, because that's what made the hit. Right. Nobody touched anything. You just set up a new drummer. Yeah. In a new spot, a new vocalist, and you hit record, and it's just like time. Okay, we've got 2 hours, half-hour lunch break, another 2 hours. Like, factory line. Total factory line. I was like, that's not fun. Yeah. That doesn't sound fun at all. So I ended up moving to LA. And he got me an interview at a couple different studios around LA. And my first one was at Record Plant. And it was just another weird timing thing where I had Record Plant was a huge, famous, well-known studio that, like, you go in at the bottom and it's like 2 years before you're even allowed to set foot in a room. Yeah. Like, you set out. You get food, you clean, you dust, you vacuum, like, that's it. And it just so happened, like, right before I left Memphis, they had installed a new SSL console, and I helped install it there in Memphis. And they had just installed one at Record Plant, their second one. And they only had one assistant that knew how to run it. Oh, wow. And so, like, really within a week, I showed up for my interview, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I know how to run that thing." And they're like, "Really?" "Oh, yeah, I just helped install it. I know it like the back of my hand." And they're like, tested me. They sent me and they said, "Okay, fine." They had the tech come in with a reel of tape, and they put it up, and they said, "Okay." And he sat there and said, "Okay, do this automation move and do this, and how do I trim this, and how do you do that, and show me how you would run this." And I was like, "Sure." And I sat there, and then they're like, "Okay, can you start tomorrow?" I'm like, for a 6-week session, mixing session for Kenny G. Oh my God. I was like, yeah. I cancel all my other interviews and But then it was like, I was 2 weeks into that session before I was like, I made a horrible mistake. I'm like listening to Kenny G 14 hours a day.
Yeah. Oh God, that didn't even cross my mind.
Oh, it was like, I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Like I came to LA to be like some rock and roll producer, mixer, engineer dude. And I'm working on this fucking endless Kenny G record with an assisting an engineer who was like brilliant, but really difficult.
Yeah.
And very demanding. And I was still fairly green. And yeah, it was hell. And I was going through like a bad breakup at the time. It was just like hell. But yeah, I made it through that, and I was at Record Plant for a couple of years, and then I went independent from there, and it's kind of sort of the beginning of where I'm at now.
Yeah. And then and so you were did you continue to stay in LA?
Yeah, I was in LA 11 years.
11 years. Oh wow.
And in that time did a bunch of different, I mean, I was mainly an engineer, but I also went there was a time when studios were tanking in LA in the 2000s. So there was around 2008, 2009, like studios were just closing left and right, and budgets were going down, and the whole, just the streaming thing just crushed the LA studio scene. And so it was really tough to find work and to get, I did a bunch of different things. I worked for this Japanese producer for a while. And I was doing like #1 records in Japan. I was mixing like the top 10 singles in Japan. I had mixed 3 of them, you know, but nobody gave a shit about that in the States at all. Like
Big
nobody
in Japan.
Yeah, exactly. So it didn't help me get any work, and sort of when I stopped doing that, like I was still back to like scrounging for anything in the States and in LA. And I ended up going back to playing more actually. I found some jobs. I worked at a guitar company and just to supplement stuff, and I ended up playing guitar for Billy Bob Thornton for a couple of years.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Dang. That's
out of another weird, just odd timing
Yeah.
thing like that happened. My friend, who was another engineer, had gotten the job. Billy had bought Slash's old house that had a studio in it, and all he wants to do is record music all the time. And so he needed a guy that was like his main guy. And my buddy got that job, and that's how I ended up. Like, he called me one day, was like, "Hey, you play lap steel, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Do you want to come over to Billy Bob's house and like play on a track? He's got to do this track for, and I'm like, "Yeah, fucking right." And I went over there and played on this track, and he's like, "Oh, I got some more stuff. Why don't you come back tomorrow?" And it's like I ended up playing, really kind of starting a band with him, with the 3 of us.
Wow.
Called the Boxmasters. And then we put out a bunch of records and toured our asses off for like 2 years.
Trip.
Yeah, it was nuts. And so I took that period of time off really from, I was still doing some stuff, engineering some things, but for the most part I was.
That's it's funny is that I always I wouldn't say I forget, but I just don't really think about the fact that you're also an amazing guitar player, because so often my interactions with you are in the studio.
Right.
And then all of a sudden something happens, you'll pick up a guitar and I'm like, "Oh my God, I forgot. Fucking Mike shreds." And it's cool, like seeing you do the stuff like the Redhead Strangers, some of that too.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, it's to see you out of the studio, playing is like one of those.
That became more and more necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played with a bunch of people in town. When I moved down here, I didn't know a soul. And so I did sort of what anybody would do. And I just went to the closest bar every night. And then that happened to be a Riviera in La Mesa.
Yeah.
And so I was there all the time. I started meeting all the people that were playing there. Met Nina Anderson there, and like all the dudes. And Stephen Ray was the bartender at the time. And, that's where I met Tim Lohman, and like because he had a band, Blackout Party. You remember those guys?
Yep.
And so I just started hanging out with all those guys, and that's how I sort of got into the scene here. But then I started playing with Nina, and it's kind of it was my intro to the musicians in the scene here, was just through playing actually. more so than studio stuff. I was still going back and forth to LA a ton.
Oh.
And then I think it was really through Lost Ark is when I really started just focusing on.
So when did you move to San Diego?
2010, around there.
2010.
Yeah, so 10 years, 10, almost 11 years now.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was just
so when I met you, it was probably right around.
Wasn't that far? Yeah, it was a couple years after.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, because
12 or something.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think that. I mean, that was like 8 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, 9 years ago.
Yeah, so I've always sort of had
to think about, but
I've always played, but it usually takes a back seat to because it doesn't pay.
A lot of times it doesn't.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But not consistently enough, I don't think.
Yeah. So. Lost Ark, that was a trippy studio.
Yeah.
I remember seeing it when you guys started doing like those singles.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing like some of the bands that I knew or whatever, and I saw them kind of pop through. I remember being like, fuck, I want to go record that place. That place sounds epic.
It was epic, yeah.
Yeah.
I was in town a couple of years, and I was working at different studios in town, just doing projects wherever I could. And it was really through Blackout Party. I had talked to those guys about making a record, producing a record for them. And we were looking for studios around. And the drummer of that band knew the owner of Lost Ark. And he had just built it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, he had a guy that was sort of the engineer guy there. It was kind of a passion project for him. Like he always wanted to have a studio. He wasn't a musician. He just wanted to have a studio and facilitate music being made in some way. Mm-hmm. He had worked in studios in New York years before. But it was, you saw it like in a strip mall in PB.
It's crazy. At least on the beach.
Yeah, on the beach. Totally unassuming. You'd never know it was there, but he built this rad room, this huge ceiling. And he had some really nice gear. And then he agreed to let us make the record there.
Yeah.
And through that process, he and I started cooking up insane ideas about, he offered to sort of ask me if I wanted to make it my home base and just do all my projects there. And so through that, I was like, yeah, but we'll need to like do some things. Like there were no isolation booths. And there was a lot of things needed to change. So he agreed to sort of invest in the studio itself a little bit, and then I started doing stuff. And then we cooked up this idea of the singles thing, which was to do a single a week for a year, which was insane.
Yeah.
We ended up doing it 2 years. But basically find bands, invite them to come in and do one song, record, mix it, have it mastered, and then put it out on SoundCloud.
Which is a really good, I mean, it's a business, obviously it's an investment,
right?
But I remember looking back at that and being in business, like thinking like, man, if you have you already have the studio built at that point in time, and it's like, what better way to drum up business than to invite people into your space, let them see how epic it is, let them see how great it can sound and all those things. And
it kept evolving.
Yeah.
I think I enabled him to continue to spend ridiculous amounts of money on the studio. And was never going to make it back. The poor guy. He was never in a million years. But, part of it was a quest, He wanted to have the best studio he could possibly have. And I certainly wanted to have the best facility I could use and have everything at my disposal. And I wanted to be able to do any kind of record. Mm-hmm. So, isolation was important and having a lot of instruments that people don't usually have. So it was important that we got like a real B3 and a real Rhodes and a real Whirly, and obviously went a little overboard with 200 guitars.
Yeah, right. Shit,
I was like 1,000.
Yeah, for people who don't know, never been, you go into this fucking place and there's guitars everywhere. There's rooms dedicated. I remember walking in, there's a drum room and it's just racks and racks of vintage snare drums.
Yeah.
Every snare that you could ever imagine. And it's tons of them, and so many things are obvious. These are never going to get used.
Yeah,
totally. But it's just they were just there though.
They were there.
It was epic.
It was cool. It was really cool because there was no excuses really. It's if you can't make a good sounding record here, then
what are we doing?
It's not. Then it's not this gear. Yeah. It's not. It's us. It's not. So Yeah, it was really cool. It ran its course. It was one of those things where it's like it couldn't have been.
Yeah.
It wasn't sustainable from the get-go, and we knew it. It was just like a really cool experiment. Through that, he started a label that sort of, and really all those singles were how we ended up sort of mining for artists that ended up being on the label, and that whole process was a huge learning experience, but it was pretty brutal. Like, the label side of the business it's dark. It's not cool. Yeah. Because you're not dealing with like we're sort of bright-eyed thinking like, oh, we want to be like a real artist-centric label. And we're interested in artist development and really, like long-term goals of 3 records in and developing an artist and their songs and their sound. And as a label, you don't deal with any of that shit. What you deal with is lawyers and managers and agents and PR people and promo people, and none of them are cool. Like very few of them are ever cool. And they're not about the music at all. They're about numbers, and they're about making money themselves. And they're not, it's a different, people think about or talk about how bad the music business is. And then they're who they're talking about. I mean, and it does work both ways, though. I mean, there's plenty of bands and musicians that just shoot themselves in the foot, and therefore our investment in the foot. You know what I mean? Like, you can't really do much with a band that's like, I don't really want to tour.
Right.
Shit. You're like, well, wait a minute. We just, the label just invested all this money.
Yeah, what was the point of all this then?
So it's on both sides, like where people don't really understand what goes into it, or what they're signing, or what they're agreeing to do.
For sure,
sort of like there was a lot. Not everybody, obviously, but there was a lot of like, oh, you guys are going to take care of making me famous now. like it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's interesting, and like being in Nashville and some of the stuff I've done in LA and things like that, and it's interesting. I always talk about in San Diego, and maybe it's just because it's such a laid back cultural thing, but it's like I feel like bands and musicians and artists there's like a gap that's missing in their understanding of what it actually like is very romanticized. And like not understanding that like there is this whole other side of it that is like even talking about like the very dark side with the people that are not likable,
right?
But in some ways they play a very significant
crucial
role that's necessary, and it's like one of those things you can't really have one without the other in that dynamic.
You need those people because I don't want to be that person,
right?
You know what I mean? You don't want the band to be that person. You don't want the singer of the band to be the one that's a hard ass and to be a jerk about like getting what they need out of a venue or what, you know what I mean? Or cold calling people, be like, yeah, I'm a singer in a band,
right?
You need people like that, but it sucks.
You
know what I mean? It's like, it's not fun to deal with them and to deal with that side of it. So, but it was a great learning experience. And then, it sort of ran its course. All of it was just like, okay, well, I think we've had enough of that.
Yeah.
In the studio itself, just the overhead was insane.
Can't imagine.
And it was just time to do other things. So we packed it up.
Yeah. And how long were you there?
About 8 years.
Oh, yeah, that's right. 8 years.
7 or 8 years, I guess.
Yeah, something like that.
And then, I mean, really, that just closed down officially like a year and a half ago. It wasn't really that long ago. And then
we'd just done Shane's record there. And no, we didn't do Kimmy's. We did Singing Serpent.
Yeah. I think I did Kimmy's. I thought I did for Kimmy's first.
Oh, you know what? There. Maybe we did her first record there.
Yeah.
We did do her first record there.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Me too. It's all a blur.
Yeah, it is a blur.
But it was awesome. Like I got to meet. I mean, everybody I know in town is pretty much through that studio. But I'm glad to not have that sort of responsibility of that place anymore.
Yeah, I have it kind of
like I narrowed it down. I have my own little mix room at my house, and that's perfect. And if I need a track, I can go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I just say thank you very much. Everything was great, and I leave, and I don't have to worry about locking it up. I don't have to worry about anything going wrong. I don't have to worry if something breaks that it's, you know what I mean? Or like, not that that really happens much, but.
Yeah. How is that dynamic though? Like, you know, because I'm only asking because I have no idea, but like, you know, at Lost Ark, being there as long as you were, it's kind of like your domain, it's like your home, and like going in, working in another studio. You obviously like every time you go to record, if you're in a different studio, you're having to adapt kind of to their situation and dynamic.
Yeah, it can be tough. I mean, it's there's certain things that I got really used to, but I was always, you know, as an independent engineer in LA, I was in different studios all the time. Okay. So I was used to that.
You're used to that kind of
But I got really comfortable with having my own setup and my own, like, I knew Lost Ark. I knew exactly where everything was. I knew how everything sounded when you put it in a certain place in the room and every mic. And it just took a while going back to trying to figure that out in different rooms. But I've also sort of settled in, like, I'm doing 90% of everything at Singing Serpent now. Yeah. So I've tried different studios in town, and they're all have their own advantages and disadvantages. They're all cool. You know, it's just that particular one works for my workflow the best. You know, the way I like to work, and the people there are great, and it sounds awesome. So the results are you know, speaking for themselves for me. So yeah, I don't really have any reason. It's not there's not that many options in San Diego. Yeah, you know, so I feel like I'm comfortable with that one. I don't need to change it up. Like I get, you know, 90% of everything I need out of that place.
And like with Kimmy's stuff, we did, I know she likes a lot of that kind of older style, and we did a lot, did it all to tape. Is it kind of a standard for studios to have a full analog kind of to tape setup?
I mean, it's getting that way now. I think it's sort of more expected. But it's a weird double-edged sword to me. Like, I'm not a purist about it. Like, the workflow sucks. It has to be part of the experience. Like, you have to know that going in. Like, everything's going to be slower. No, we can't fly shit around. No, we can't, you know, edit stuff and pull that. You know, it's like, everybody has to sort of dedicate themselves to that process. And the good thing is it does slow everything down. You got to, you know, like, stop, rewind. Like, that slows everybody's pace down to take a little bit of a breath and go, oh, okay, let's really listen to this. And you don't have the luxury of a million tracks, and you don't have, you know, you can't do all the fancy shit.
It puts a lot of the the focused energies into that moment. As opposed to later.
And I think it changes psychologically for people that are recording. They know, like, suddenly there's a real red light happening, and there's real things happening to a real physical piece of media, instead of like just ones and zeros that you can do endlessly forever. There's nothing at stake. When that red light goes on and those reels start moving around, you're like, oh fuck, like we got to deliver. So it definitely, I do enjoy that part of it, but then there's parts of it that
I've always enjoyed
so difficult. So like, just physically difficult to deal with, and like, just I just got used to working on Pro Tools much faster. You know,
much more efficient and
and faster. But
well, I would say it's like, as a drummer, it is one of those things where I learned to like it because it changes your approach, and I always like equate it to like driving an older car, or if you surfing a longboard versus a shortboard. It's like the wave's the same, the road's the same, but something happens when you sit in that vessel that's different, that changes the way you're going to approach.
Totally.
And I know that it is one of those where everything, you reel things back, and you kind of like, you know, and especially when you're doing analog, especially typically you're doing it as a band. As full, you know, and it's not just you by yourself and they're playing to a click, and it definitely changes.
No, I think that part is really, it's the most beneficial part of it. And even more so than the sound. It sounds different, but it's not that different. It's like, it's only as good as what you put into it. And so, like anything. So, I like the sound of it, but I'm not bummed if I don't have it. at all.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a matter of, excuse me. It's the workflow that changes, and it's really just a mental thing, you know. Everybody feeling like it means a little bit more, which is cool.
Yeah.
Which is great, because it should. But
yeah.
I end up doing hybrid stuff most of the time, where I'll record the basics and most of it on tape and then transfer it to Pro Tools and do overdubs and stuff from there.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to work the best as far as the benefits of sonically, the benefits of everybody in the moment, and then the ease of being able to do overdubs and move a little quicker.
Yeah.
Pro Tools and be able to do some things that Pro Tools can do. I'm not a huge, I'm not a big editor or fan of crazy editing, but it sure is convenient sometimes to be able to quickly just go like, no, that's a better fill. Let's just move it. Like that's a better lick, or that's a better take. I can go through, really it's more about choosing takes. I can do playlists and pick the best takes, where on tape, like that's like, no, what you just played is it.
Right. So basically at that point in
either
time,
we erase it completely and do a different one, or, you know.
Yeah. So you're essentially at that point in time, you're just routing it as a tool.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's just a texture tool than it is being like, this is your analog tape that, like, you know, and so, which I do, obviously there's people that are doing that.
Yeah. I've done a couple. I just finished a project like that, and it's just a totally different. That's when I start to get bummed about analog tape, is when I have to do an entire record on it. Then it's like, this again, like when you're like in 80 takes into a solo into something, when you're like, stop, rewind, find the spot, stop, punch.
Yeah.
You know, it's like just that after a while, it's like,
yeah. And also,
and not keeping, you know, because you're not keeping, you only have so many tracks, so you're not keeping every take and picking later. You're going like,
this is it.
Do you really think you can do better than that one? Because if you can't, you're blowing this whole take. Like, this is it. So if you really want another one, say goodbye to this last take. It's gone forever. No one's ever going to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
And then you realize, you know, 80 takes later, like, that third take was probably better than anything we've got now.
Yeah. Well, and I listen to a lot of podcasts about, you know, people talking about the engineering process, and like going back to earlier talking about with Rick Rubin and Dave Cobb, and they're talking kind of about that. Like, Rick's so wise, and he's so, like, I feel like in that podcast, Dave was trying to pigeonhole a few things, and Rick was just always kind of like, it depends.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like,
it really does.
Some bands we're gonna do 80 takes. Some bands we're only going to do 2. And when I say we're done, we're done, you know, and it's like, you know, he's like, this is as good as it's going to get. Like, and that whole idea of it being like in those situations where, you know, like we think about like live, like there's live records. And then there's also the reality that, like, when people are recording in that process, playing live, like that's a live record. That was a live moment.
Yeah.
You know, and it just is, you know, it was just in a controlled kind of environment, not in front of a ton of people.
Those are the best feeling records. I mean,
yeah.
You know, to me, those are the records I love. Those are the records where you can really feel everybody playing together. And I think it's every situation is different. Every record is different. And so I don't like to say one way is better than the other.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I know that all the time. Obviously, it's like nice to have like a reference, like going into record and saying like, oh, what is the idea? But I see, you know, when you see people go down that rabbit hole of trying to like copy a sound and like chase that.
Yeah, it's impossible. I get it all the time. I mean, because I'm primarily mixing now, and I'm constantly getting people that are like, we want it to sound like this record, and I'm like, you're not that band, and you weren't in that room at that time,
right?
Like, you can't expect a record you made in your bedroom, you know, to sound like a record that was made in $1 million studio over 6 months with like the best gear and the best producers and the best engineers and the best, you know, it's like,
and completely,
and even if you did, it still wouldn't sound the same. Like, you can get 2 different people. That was an interesting thing about Lost Ark. That was like, that I got to learn by being there every single day and recording 1 million different bands in the same room, is that room sounded totally different every day. And it wasn't all the same gear, same mics, same drum kit. We had that 70s Ludwig kit that I love to record.
Yeah.
and every drummer sounded different on it.
Yeah.
Completely different. And it's not in the gear. It's not in the room. It's not any of that shit. It's those people at that time in their hands. It's like in their throat or whatever, you know. So
and it's in
chasing something that somebody else has done is just an impossible.
Well, and I would say too, the other side of it is like it's also in the song.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the other part of that too is it's like you know, a good song is a good song no matter how shitty the recording might be.
Yeah, and you can make it work no matter what.
Yeah. And that's and that's a whole nother thing too that gets overlooked so much, and people are chasing sounds and like kind of almost forgetting that like, man, maybe you should have chased the song a little.
The song, yeah. No, that's true. Yeah, you can't fix a bad song. There's nothing I or anybody else can do for your for the sound of your record. That's that's definitely true. I see that all the time where it's like, oh, they had a really big budget for this. And they went to a pro studio, great gear, great engineer, everything is recorded perfectly, but it's just not working.
Yeah.
And no matter, like, I can't get the mix to work because the song doesn't work. Because there's nothing like, I can make it sound good. I can make it sound nice.
Sure.
And professional, but it's never going to work.
Yeah.
Like, never.
Yeah.
So, I don't know I think the lesson there is just work on songs.
What's your experience been like? You know, I've worked with you a number of times in there, and you stay pretty hands off. But like, how's your experience been? Obviously, in situations where there's this stuff, and you just are like, "Why are we recording this right now?" Like,
yeah, I mean, there's definitely sort of. It depends on the role. Like for a long time, especially when I first moved to San Diego, when I was in LA, I was doing a ton. Most of the engineering gigs I was doing was like R&B and pop stuff and stuff that I'd never listened to.
Mm-hmm.
I like some of that stuff, but most of it was stuff that I would never want to spend my time listening to. And it really kind of was dragging on me, and it was kind of eating at my soul a little bit to spend so much time on music that I mean, my whole life is music.
Yeah.
And so much time on music that I don't enjoy. It was just sort of killing my will to want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And so when I moved here, I sort of made up my mind, like I wasn't going to do anything that I didn't legitimately either like fully enjoy or just see the merit in or something. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I had to have some connection to it, either by a person, somebody, you know, I've done records for people that I wouldn't listen to, but I love them as humans.
Mm-hmm.
And that's worth it. You know what I mean? But, so then I decided I really wanted to produce, and that's what I really wanted to do. And so I focused on that only. And I was like approaching bands just to produce, engineer, and mix. You know, it's like sort of, I can do it all. Yeah. I'll produce and that's very hands-on for me. So that's like, we'll talk about arrangement, and we'll talk about, we'll change parts, we'll rewrite stuff, we'll go in like, and really try to make the songs the best they can possibly be. And I did a lot of that at Lost Ark, especially with the label, and I produced a ton of records. And then I just got a little bit to the point where maybe I was a little burnt out on it, but it was like, that's the hardest fucking job. Like, to choose the hardest job. Like you put in more hours than anybody else, including the artist, on the songs and on the record and on everything else. And from the rehearsals, from the first demos all the way to the mastering, like it's your responsibility to make sure it's good. And that, I think I got a little burnt out on it, and a little bit like, I just enjoy, so like there's sort of an instant gratification with mixing where you're like, in the beginning of a day, I open up a session and it's just raw tracks, and it's like this puzzle that I have to put together. And then at the end of the day, it's supposed to sound like a finished song. Yeah. And I love that that process, and I love the gratification I get at the end of the day when I go, oh yeah, that sounds like I took all these millions of little pieces laying on the floor, and I made one thing out of it that people can hear and is tangible, and people can experience and hopefully have some reaction to, and the artist can, you know, see their vision come to life. And so that was just a lot more appealing to me. And so a lot of the projects, I made another conscious effort after Lost Art closed to sort of maybe shy away from calling myself a producer or being that hands-on, and just sort of being okay with, I'm here to capture it the best I possibly can and let you guys do your thing, and not have, it's freeing to not have an opinion.
Yeah.
To go like, it's not for me to decide which way you guys should go. I'll definitely have an opinion.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
for
in my head, I'm sitting here thinking, I was like, I know you got an opinion.
Of course I do. But there, it's
yeah.
It's good to just sort of do your job sometimes and not have to.
Yeah.
But lately I've sort of gone back around again to like, I'm doing more producing now, and I'm doing some more things where it's all a learning curve. It's all just constantly evolving and relearning stuff and learning to try to do it better or to do it differently. To me, I'm constantly revolving between producing and engineering and mixing and playing music, and it's all part of the same thing, but it's cyclical,
Yeah. I would say is in my head, I always think about that, even when I'm in the studio and I'm playing, and there's the mixing, and there's a few different people I've worked with. Some of them are very adamant about, they're like, I will not say anything.
Right.
I'm literally just here. I got everything. I'm pushing the button, and everything's else up to you guys.
Yeah.
I'm like, and it is that sometimes where you can read someone and kind of go, and like, and you can kind of see, and like I kind of glance, and I can like, even like with you, like I know that I can kind of glance and see where you're at and be like, yeah, guys, we should maybe redo that one. And you'd be like, oh, I don't know, like whatever you guys think. I'll kind of be like,
Yeah. As I've gotten older, I found my poker face is way worse. Like I have very like, I can't really hide how I'm really feeling as much as I could in the past. Because, in LA, that's a skill you learn, is to just shut your mouth and do your job and not to have an opinion. That's very much the job there. And you learn that skill like any other skill, and learn to be like, yeah, sounds great. Let's do it again. Like, yeah, everything's wonderful. And especially with music you hate.
Oh, God.
You're working on shit till 4 a.m. and stuff. Like, yeah, I've listened to this fucking hi-hat sound for 6 hours because you're so stoned you don't even know what you're doing.
Oh, my God.
I'm the one that's supposed to be like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, sounds great. Let's keep going. Because it's by the hour and I'm getting paid. So.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's stuff. I did learn that skill, but it's harder and harder for me to like, I don't hide well when I'm not enjoying something or when I think it's fucked up or something.
Yeah.
And for the most part, though, I try not to work with anybody now.
Yeah.
I'm lucky that I've gotten into a position where I can sort of pick and choose projects a little bit. It's not even about picking and choosing. It's just that the kinds of projects I want to do are coming to me more because those are the kinds of projects I've been doing.
Right.
That's just through the network I've built and the kinds of records I've done are attracting more of the kinds of records I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty lucky in that sense. And it doesn't come up much where I'm like, fuck, I hate this. Like, or like, this is a disaster and I don't, they need to redo this or they need to rewrite this or what, it doesn't happen often at all.
Yeah.
And for the most part, people, I enjoy having other people's sort of vision and being a part of that without having to put my 2 cents in.
Yeah.
Unless that's my job. And then, I have no bones about saying, that really sucked. Like, start over.
Yeah. Also, especially when everyone feels like they killed it.
Oh, yeah.
And having to be like, actually.
Be like, no, you didn't. Not at all.
And then also keeping spirits, that's like, it's like herding kittens, keeping spirits high, to be in a good mood. So that way they, kind of, you can manipulate the situation to be like, how do I tell you that was not good, but also don't make you self-conscious. So that way we don't sit here and do this for 50 more takes. Yeah.
That's another learned skill. It's just one of those things where it's like, you have to be skilled it's a negotiation, it's a negotiating skill. It takes a lot of trust to, it's not lost on me. I think maybe because I started out as a player, really why I got into recording is because I was frustrated that I couldn't communicate with engineers and I couldn't get what I wanted out of a recording. So I always remember that. I'm trying to like make sure I make it as easy for people to feel comfortable and feel like they can trust me. But you don't have much time to develop that relationship.
Right. It's got to kind of do it
You're
pretty
bringing
quick.
your art to somebody to help you see
Yeah.
it through, and you might have just met them, or you might have
Mm-hmm.
not know them very well. It's a big deal to let go and to be able to trust somebody. And I don't take it lightly. Like I know, so I'm always delicate about learning how to go get somebody to the place where you think they should go without like heavy-handedly trying to steer them there. You know,
Yeah.
you're just kind of steering them in the right direction where you're like, you know, that's definitely a skill. The best producers like Rick Rubin is a fucking ninja about that shit. You know what I mean? Like he can get the best takes out of people because he's just such a Zen master. Like
He is just like a shaman. He's like
he's just Jedi mind trick you and be like, you know, do you think that was the best that you could have done? Well, no, Rick. And then you just go, you know.
Yeah.
You know, that's a skill that not everybody has. Not everybody who wants to be an engineer or producer, that's something they talk about on YouTube or in on books or something. It's like that people skill of you're there to see their art through. Like you're there to see their vision through. You're there to help them make it better than they can even imagine.
Yeah.
It can be. So that's a really delicate thing, especially with artists who are delicate anyway.
Yeah. So it is an interesting dynamic, and that skill set is something, I mean, in a lot of things, but that ability to recognize that, like, okay, what is the goal? And like, I'm here to help facilitate that. And that's the biggest goal. It really is. I'm here to facilitate you achieving the thing that you need. And so like the ability, like being able to communicate and draw that out of someone, you know, you're drawing their dream out of them to a degree, you know, and just kind of leaving them the room to do it.
And a studio is the weirdest place to, like, you sit and write a song with your band and you practice and you play shows. You get in a studio, it's like being in a spaceship and like playing in headphones and in a bubble. Like it's fucked up and it's disorienting and it never sounds the same as it does when you're in the room playing with your band. So just to be sensitive to that and to understand that and try to get them to the place where they're the most comfortable, the most efficiently and the best way possible without going, that sucked, do it again.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's your session's over. Let's go home. If you do that, you know what I mean? Like, and I know people who do that and it's like, or this has to be a certain way. And no, you have to do this. And like, you know, I know engineers like that and they're just fucking vibe killers. And it's like,
experienced that for sure.
Like, can just be sort of quiet and carry a big stick. You know what I mean? Like that's that's, at least for me, the people, the mentors I've had, I've seen them work with an artist in a way where it's like, oh, that producer's getting exactly what he wants, but the artist has no idea that that's what's happening. He thinks it's their idea.
Right.
That's the perfect scenario.
Skill set right there to make someone think it's their idea.
Yeah. To just have them get to the place where they're performing their best and have them feel like they got there naturally. That's hard to do, but it's like, that's my favorite part about doing it, you know, is getting to the point where like, holy shit, like this morning we started with absolutely nothing and there's a song there now. And it's the best you've ever done that song. And it's the best performance the best you've ever played and the best you've ever sang or whatever. You know, that's what keeps me wanting to do it. That's the drug.
Yeah.
It's like starting with a blank canvas and at the end of the day, you've got something like, holy shit, that's a song. Like that's a thing that we all love.
Yeah.
And that sounds like that's my dream. That's, you know, for the artist, like that's what I had envisioned. Or it's better than I had envisioned. Or it might be different, but it's like fucking awesome. Like,
right. That's one of those, for me personally, when I first few times I ever went into a studio and was recording, it was the most terrifying and probably worst experience in my musical journey because everything's so under the microscope. And it's like when you play in a band with your band in a room, there's a lot of stuff that you don't hear. Yeah. It might sound good when you guys are all playing together because you're really kind of just hearing these things. And it isn't until you show up and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I did not know that was there. I didn't know that was
Yeah, it's
I thought
super
that sounded
revealing.
it's super revealing, which is part of the reason why, like, I've built out the space that I have. I talked about it was a rehearsal space turned into a recording situation because I learned that early on that like being able to play something back and hear it and be able to expose it is like
Yeah,
everything.
totally.
And so now I don't want to be surprised when I go show up in the studio and be like, oh man, maybe we should have worked these parts
Yeah.
out more.
I think that's what's great about technology getting cheaper and easier for people to make good quality recordings because everyone's getting that experience a lot easier than they used to.
Yeah.
When my first experiences in the studio were the same. And that's what led me to want to engineer was just hating the experience in the studio of like not being able to convey, like just having to blindly trust somebody and then having just not be happy and just being like, why doesn't this sound the way I want it to sound in my head? And how can I communicate what I want? I can't. I don't have the language skills. I don't have the.
Yeah.
And some people make it a lot more difficult. Some engineers are very much like they don't want you to know it. They want to feel like they're holding some sort of secret that you're not in on. And it's like, I think that's the total wrong approach to making records and to making people comfortable and making.
Yeah, I think it's fear-based and some of that, especially with the way things are. I had a really good experience. Recording Hollander's record I took on like as first time like producer role on that, and was working in a studio with Tommy Richardson, who was engineering, and it was a completely different approach than I had done previously, which was in every other project I was in, we had developed these songs as a band, and then we went and recorded them, these things that we'd already finished. And it was like here's our top 10 songs that we like, and let's record them so we can give them out or whatever. And this was completely different, where it was like, it started off as just ideas. And then it was like, then we had worked something out to where we can, myself, Hollander, and Tommy would kind of work them into something actually in the studio, and we're able to play around in that capacity. And that's when I fell in love with that process. And Tommy was so open to just like teach, kind of like letting me shadow him as he was working, and kind of being able to learn and see that process. And going back to that, I was that thing of being able to like, okay, this was this iPhone idea that was just you and a guitar, and now we've completely ripped it of what it was and flipped it and then turned it into something else. Now we're leaving today, and maybe not with a finished song, but now all of a sudden we have this crazy idea. And then over the course of the next week, that idea just evolved into something else. And then, eventually, having that thing and looking back at that process. And I've always loved the process in most things, and I've cared about the actual finished product.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, like, in the studio, I've always just loved being in the studio. As a drummer, for a lot of things, traditionally the drummer stuff would always be done first.
Yeah.
And then I would be like, well, I'm going to be here every day that we're here, because I just want to be in there. I love that process. And yeah.
It's something to sort of. I was having this conversation this morning with Alice Bryant. We're talking about just the state of everything. Everything's fucked. All the venues are closed. Nobody can tour. But what I was saying, like, you have the ability to still hone your craft. A lot of people don't. I think, well, I can't play a gig, so I'm just going to do nothing. Or I was like, you could play your set every single day and record it. And learn from it and get better and go and listen to it and go, oh, like that isn't working or this is working. It's like, I think it's incredibly valuable to be able to evaluate your own work. I mean, I guess I'm lucky in that sense as a mixer. That's what I do. It's like I'm in real time evaluating my own work and then going back when there's revisions, like inevitably processes. I get a song, I mix it, I send it off, then they have a bunch of notes for me, and I get to have to reevaluate my work based on things that they want changed, and until we get to the point where everybody's super happy with it, then it's finished. And I think that's invaluable to sort of getting better at anything. Like, just to have, you're not if you're in a band and you're playing in a bar, your feedback is from the audience.
Sure.
But if you don't have that you still need some feedback. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I encourage anybody to record themselves all the time and listen back to it.
Yeah.
And, well, even with your phone or whatever.
Yeah.
And just evaluate where you're at and what you're doing and
Shit
see what you need to work on.
The shit you can do on your phone now is crazy.
It's insane.
Yeah. That's been a whole nother thing, like what you're able to do. I was talking with Francis Bloom a little bit earlier, and he said he's coming in next week to do some stuff with that Al's project.
Yeah, I've been mixing most of the stuff for the Al Howard Rights project.
Yeah,
and I've been doing some of the stuff. A lot of it's real stripped down and stuff. I've been doing some of it in my garage, just. And Francis came in and did one song already, and we're doing another one, I think, next week.
Yeah. But he did a really cool, he's done some stuff on his phone where he put out a covers record, and it was just and then all of the seasonal singles he put out, and they're everything just on, and not even like the microphone, like the actual, the speaker, just like hit record, and setting it on a piano or, and all those things. And it's blown away that, again, it's not a studio. And when you really listen to it, it's very evident that it's not done in a studio and all those things. But
he's so good. Like he's so compelling that it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
You can sing into a tin can and a string. It would sound great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I'm. So I like people sort of get caught up on gear and stuff. And it's like, it's not the gear. It doesn't matter. Gear doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done records. We did a record where I produced a record for a guy in England that we couldn't beat. We did all his demos, and there was one song he sang into his phone in his car at 3 a.m. We couldn't beat it. We tried and tried and tried. We just couldn't beat that performance. We ended up just using it on the record.
No way.
I imported it and his vocal from his phone.
Mm-hmm.
I imported it and used that for the record. And it was because it was like we tried. It's just it was so magical. It was such a moment, and it was like, that's all that matters. Like, fuck. Yeah. Like, don't worry about it. Even today, I had a project I was working on that somebody did in GarageBand, sent it to me, and asked me to add like a bass part or something to it. And I did a quick rough mix with the added bass part and sent it to them, like literally 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, it's amazing. We cried. Send it to mastering. And I'm like, no, wait. I didn't mix it. That's just the rough mix. And they're like, don't fucking touch it.
Oh,
it's
my
perfect.
God.
Yeah. And it's like, that's a lesson for me.
Yeah.
To go, you don't need, like, sometimes if it's all there, you don't need to do anything to it. Sometimes you just put up the faders and it's all there.
If it's good, it's good.
Yeah.
Period. And and it's funny how caught up we get in wanting there to be a more complicated process.
Yeah.
Or wanting there to be more complicated notes and things like that. Which is an experience I've had with that too, where it's like stuff comes back and stuff, and like battling with artists on things because it's like I just feel like there should be.
Right.
And it's like, wait, if it's good, it's good. Like don't feel like you have to find something,
Yeah. And I'm guilty of it as much as anybody.
Yeah.
That was a prime example. Like, I was kind of like, oh, no, wait. Like, I had so many other bullshit things I was going to do to it to ruin it. Like, I had so many other, I didn't put this cool compression plug in, or this, like, I didn't, I threw it up in 5 seconds. But that it felt right.
Yeah.
I didn't get to do all my tricks.
Yeah.
And somehow I was like, oh, no, wait till you hear it when I do all that. And they're like, no, it's done.
Yeah. But, diving into doing some recording, and it's one of those things too, where like, obviously, I've started investing in kind of getting some things to, like, as we were showing you earlier, but to accomplish something. What that is, I don't really know yet, right. But just trying to do something and having, and being able to, feed that side of me that wants to be more active in chasing those kind of sounds and stuff like that. And as I do that, I find myself going down like a thing where I can go for, like, I could stay up till 4 a.m, YouTubing all these things and all this stuff. Yeah. And then also, and like trying to figure out, like, okay, well, I want to learn how this equipment works, or I want to learn like what are these people doing with this mic, or how all of those things. And then I find myself at the end of the day, like when a push comes to shove, like, oh, I'm gonna mark this thing. So tomorrow when I'm here, I want to see what they're doing and all of that, and then realizing, and then I'll like basically strip all of that, and I'll go, wait a second. Like honestly, I was like, I just want to like, I'm just gonna start. Like I don't care what anyone else is doing
Right.
with this piece of equipment and with this mic and what they think it should be used on.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just gonna start fucking with this stuff everywhere and turning knobs and all those things, and it's fine, and just being like, well,
Yeah, that's exactly how I learned. I mean, I blew shit up, but
Yeah.
that's exactly how I learned to do it.
Yeah, and that's been an interesting process because it is, well, one, it's trial by fire, and I just know for me, I'm gonna learn better that way anyway. And the other side of that too is it's like it goes to that everything that we just talked about, and the whole mentality of being like, well, oh, how am I gonna recreate what this idiot did on YouTube, you know?
Yeah.
And realizing that like, well, this isn't his room, and that's not it's just not. And and going back to like, I don't want to keep referencing this podcast with Rick Rubin, but I had just listened to it, and there's so many things of it that were just so profound. And they're talking, they're like, dude, when you're sitting there and you're chasing the drum sound off of this record, not only are you never going to hit that sound, but now you're not going to even make the equipment that you have sound the best it could have sounded.
Right.
And that like your goal is to be like, this is what I have, and this is what I have to work with. How do I make this sound as the best that it can be?
Yeah.
And like that's your goal.
Sure.
And it's like not trying to find it and recreate something else somewhere, you know.
Yeah, and it's just way more fun to
Yeah.
fuck around than it is to watch a video. Like it's, you know, I get sucked into it too. I mean, there's a place for it. I feel like I'm always trying to learn and to be a little bit better at everything that I'm interested in, you know. And so sometimes, yeah, you glean little bits of information out of a cool video or somebody that's doing something really cool, but yeah, it can be a rabbit hole, and then like you find yourself not actually doing anything.
Yeah.
And the whole fun of it is just screwing around and getting weird sounds, and that's it's a hard, the whole phone YouTube thing. That's a tough. That's a tough
dark hole. Man.
It is a dark hole. It's a real tough one.
Yeah.
I feel like I would accomplish a lot more if it had never been invented.
Yeah. Well, what's your opinion on that? To some, because I know that it's like you find a lot of people that love that, like, oh, it's cool. People are able to fully now record on their own, and there's a lot of people that stand on this side. They're like, oh God, it's another home studio thing, and like especially as someone who's a mixer. Yeah. Like I'm assuming that like when someone sends you something that was recorded in a shitty room, and I mean just makes your job a nightmare.
It can. I've had to deal with it a lot this year with COVID for sure, because not like most of the projects that I've ended up working on are all home recording because everybody's at home making records. I'm all for it. Yeah. Really. I'm all for any way that anybody can record. I often think about doing I would love to just do just give a really basic course on how to do it a little bit better.
I would take it.
And just to just put some videos out there and be like, okay, look, I know you're using GarageBand with a $100 USB mic. That's totally cool. Here's how to make it sound a little bit better. You know, because I do end up with a lot of stuff that's recorded in bathrooms and recorded. Some of it sounds awesome. Some of it's has a vibe and it's really cool and it's really creative. Some of it just is really, it's really environment is one thing, but when you get something that's clipping or that has a buzz, a really bad buzz or something that's just taking you, it's taking you out of the song and out of the music. It's the technical thing that went wrong that is taking you away from experiencing the song. That's when it gets frustrating, but for the most part, it's been cool. I've been able to, it's a challenge every time, but it's okay, well, how do I make this sound like a pro record? When it was obviously not. Right. But you don't always necessarily have to make it. I'm not trying to make it, as we said, I'm not trying to make it sound like another record. I just want it to sound like the best version of it that I can. And try to elevate, the some of the parts are greater than how's that go? whatever. Like that, the raw puzzle pieces that I get end up being something that's better than just the pieces by themselves. And
yeah.
So I don't have a problem. Like I love that people can record now anywhere and on their phones and in a laptop. Like I think it's great. I think it's always a joy when I get something that was recorded in a professional studio, like, and it's all clean and it sounds great. You know what I mean? Like the sound's already there. It's always a lot easier to make it sound like that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, I think people don't really quite get, like, it sounds like it, regardless. It sounds like that piece of music in the way it was recorded and how it was recorded and the spirit in which it was recorded. I can enhance that and I can try to make that sound better, but it's still going to sound like that thing in its essence.
Right.
It's not going, and it should.
Right.
It's that moment.
You're recording. It's a live record of that moment.
Yeah. It's some of my favorite records. It's like the early band shit that they recorded in a house. It's like some of my favorite records. If I listen to it critically, they weren't recorded very well. Like they don't. Yeah. Like it's not. It doesn't sound great, but it is great. Yeah. So therefore, it sounds great. Like. So you just have to keep that in mind. Like record any way you want. The important thing is to record and to write and to make music. Like who cares how you do it?
Yeah. That's what podcast I did with Pete. It was funny talking to him about that and like a bunch of stuff he's worked on. And he's like, he kind of said the same thing. He's like, dude, all my favorite records sound like fucking dog shit. Yeah. He's like every Husker Du record is like, dude, it's terrible. Yeah. Sonically. He's like, but if it was any different, it wouldn't be that, and that's part of what just made it what it is. And John Moreland's one where, my buddy Jake and he kind of turned me on to him and there was a while I had listened to him for a while and he had too. And then all of a sudden one day he discovered, he's like, dude, did you know that he recorded all that shit in his house by him? Like it was just, like he played every part.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I was like, what? Yeah. And it's like, dude,
I love those records.
Yeah. And then when I go back and listen to it, I go, oh, I can kind of hear that. Like that cymbal is kind of fucked up and like all those things. And you're like, but at the same time, you're like, I didn't notice it. Like it sounded just like I thought. It just sounded like it's the way it should sound. And then I almost was bummed that I knew that now because it was like a thing where I go here that I was like, oh yeah, man, like a couple of those little things. But it is interesting that like when you don't have that information going into something and you hear it and like some of those records that are like that and you're hearing them just as they are and you took them in as that thing and that thing was great to you in that moment. Even especially like thinking about being younger when you don't know anything. And so you're taking that in and it just is amazing. And it doesn't matter what it really was behind the scenes, like whether it was recorded in a fucking bathroom or it was recorded in $1 million studio. Like if I really loved it and I enjoyed it, that's the most important factor.
And it still comes down to the song.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
If the song speaks to you, then none of it matters at all.
Yeah.
And, I think that's super cool. I mean, I love John Moreland. I love those records. That's cool to know, actually.
Yeah,
But I don't know. It's like there's no rules.
Yeah.
I think people get hung up on it. There's always a thing that happens where when you're learning something or when you're trying to get good at something, you always go too far into the technical side of things, and it takes you a while to unlearn that shit. And for me, it was like. When I was focusing super hard on mixing and trying to become, I mean, that's to me, mixing records is like jazz. Like it's a lifelong pursuit. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like I'm way better than I was 5 years ago, but I still feel like I got a long way to go. It's never going to be over. And so as long as somebody makes a record that sounds better than the records I'm making, it's never going to be over. Mm-hmm. So I feel like there's moments where you're studying and you really get into something. Same with an instrument. If you're like as a drummer, I'm sure there was a time where you practiced rudiments and practiced like shit that was not musical.
No.
And then it took you forever to unlearn that shit and actually play musically. Yeah. It's the same. Yeah. Every aspect of this is the same with any art. So mixing, mastering, engineering, it's all the same. Yes. Where like you worry about technically, it ruined music for me for a while. Like, where you're like listening super critically to everything, and then every record you're like, oh, the 2K is too fucking whatever, or you know what I mean? Or there's that snare sucks, or who gives a nobody cares about a snare sound. Nobody in the world except fucking drummers and engineers.
Yeah.
And but it's those things that like it took me a long time to get past the point where I could just go back and listen to a song and not even think about it. And that's the interesting, when you said John Moreland, I was thinking about like, I didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah.
Because I enjoy his records so much that I don't listen that way. If I'm listening to something I don't listen critically.
Yeah.
I don't listen to anything critically unless I've
That's
been
your
hired
job.
to listen to it critically.
Yeah.
And that took years though. Like that's hard.
Yeah.
To let go of that.
Yeah, I can see that. It is that thing where like the thing you love becomes your job, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And all the things that you didn't think about that came along with the job.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny as you brought up. The only reason I was saying you brought up the whole thing of rudiments, it's because it's been like an ongoing joke, and everyone says like you bring this up every podcast, but I do. It's like and I love it. You brought it up with that mentality, but I never spent time learning the rudiments and doing all those things, and it's one of those things where I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
And I wasn't for a long time. Because I used to be like, fuck, like because I'd be like, oh my, most of the time it was imposter syndrome. I'm like, I shouldn't even fucking be here. Like my skill set is not where it should be with the people that I'm playing with. But realizing that I didn't have to unlearn all this stuff. Like I didn't have to learn to play less because I didn't have the ability to play more.
Right.
So it's like one of those things where it's like, and I see that all the time with people I work with in the studio who like, they come in and they're a shredding guitar player who grew up fucking playing the craziest shit in their house. And then we get in the studio and you're like, sitting there and you're like, man, you're gonna have to dial that back like 75%.
Yeah, that's a big one. You can't practice taste.
No.
It's just you got to figure that one out. It comes with experience and time more than anything. Or just environment, lucky enough to be in the right environment with the right people going, don't do that.
Yeah. But it's funny is I don't know, I just thought of this so I was talking with Francis Bloom earlier, and it's been a thing since I did the podcast with him where we've been talking about the Beatles a lot, and he's kind of schooled me on, because they were just not something I never got into, and so I'm starting to dive into a couple of their records, and we were talking about Ringo, and he's like, dude, you played a right-hand drum set, but it was left-handed, so when you go and you listen, like his fills sound different because he's starting like with his left hand, whereas like a right hand, and I at that moment I was like, dude, that's crazy because I'm a right-handed drummer, but I naturally start my fills with my left hand for no fucking reason other than I never practiced rudiments.
Right.
I just always did the thing that felt comfortable. Like, okay, I know there's a fill, and for whatever reason, starting with my left hand was the natural thing for me to do. And we were just dying laughing because he's like, oh shit. He's like, we're about to start covering every Beatles song, for like just something stupid like that. But it's a trip, like thinking all those little nuanced things that make the players
I think
who they are.
My 16-year-old son is just starting to play guitar, which I'm over the moon about, but I'm trying really hard to just like let him have his thing and not hover and not be like freak out over every little thing he's doing. But it's like it's been so amazing to watch him discover shit, and the way he's discovering it differently than me, and the way that I did it, and just that natural discovery of shit is like, that's so much magic in that. There's so much, like it's rekindling the fire of discovering guitar again for me too. Like, I mean, I've played guitar since I was 13, so forever. But and I'm a proficient guitar player, and I love playing, and I want to work on it being better, but it's like till you see it through the eyes of somebody starting out, and you see it like every day, I can see his improvement and just see the things that are the light bulbs that are going off in his head. Like, it totally just sparks. It's a new appreciation, a new spark of things for me. That's like, and I want to keep him away from music theory as long as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Because that was the thing for me. Like I was much the same way. Like I started out and I didn't have, I had like 1 or 2 lessons and didn't like it, and then just learned by ear mostly. And then I started taking music theory classes, and my playing sucked for 2 years.
Oh man.
And then until I could forget it all.
Yeah.
And then go back to just sort of.
Yeah. That's been interesting. Last year I started to dive into being like, I want to, like, especially actually it happened because of when I was working on Hollander's record and being a drummer. Which is interesting too, as I'm saying this, that I found that a lot of times drummers end up in these weird producer roles with things, and I don't know necessarily why that is, but
and Dave Cobb's a producer too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a drummer.
Yeah.
I know he's a producer.
He's
a drummer.
I mean, he's a drummer. Yeah, but
kind of multi-instrumental.
Yeah, and I could dabble on guitar, but I mean, I could play, but I can't, like, I don't understand it.
Right.
And so it was an interesting, like, predicament to be in a situation to where I know what sounds good and I know what should be there.
Right.
Or I know what I'm looking for, but how do I verbalize this to a guitar player?
Right.
You know, to say something like, "Oh man, I feel like it could go to this," you know, and the proper thing would to be like, "Oh, it should go to this note."
Right.
You know, instead, you know, on this thing, or it should whatever. And so like, and I was having this thing of this frustration and it's like, fuck, like it's like a language barrier.
Yeah.
And feeling that I was talking to someone in a completely different language because I know what I want to say. I know that it's there.
Right.
And like having to be like, how do I communicate to this person to get them
I feel like that some of the most creative shit can come out of that though.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes the limitations of what, you know, can come up with something really unique. Because if you're sitting there to a guitar player and be like, I don't know, it just needs to be more green.
Yeah.
Like, then their interpretation of that is going to be something, maybe it's not what you had in mind.
Right.
But it'll be something different and it might be even cooler.
Right.
It could
Absolutely.
be, if you go, no, it's an F sharp, then they're going to play an F sharp.
Right.
There's no mystery in that. There's no magic.
Or, 100%, because it's going to go through this phase of, oh, it's so something like this. I'm like, no. Yeah. Well, no, a little bit more like, you know, like, you know, yeah, totally, like more descriptive and like, you know, but it causes you to lean more into like, how do I describe the feel that I want?
Yeah.
Versus the note that I want, because it's not.
Which is really more important.
Yeah.
You know, and so I wouldn't worry about.
Well, I did eventually. I was like, and again, as being a drummer, eventually I got to a spot and I was like, this is fucking dumb. I'm like, this is just like, I'm not gonna be like shreddy guitar player. I don't need to like, I don't need to sit at the piano. Like,
yeah.
And it was kind of that realization too, in that, like, you know, kind of like what you said, and even for like, you know, talking about the drums, like, no, like the inability to do certain things in like the skill set side,
right,
caused me to strengthen and rely on feeling, more than anything. And
which is really hard to undo once you've learned something. Like there's a magic moment in there. There's some in the gray areas of knowing just enough to get yourself in trouble and not enough to like to fuck it up, you know. And there's like, I envy that sometimes, as far as my, you know, sometimes I think my understanding of how it all works hinders me from being truly creative. And that and I have to get into a totally different headspace to get to the point where I can let go of rules. Because, you know, it's like, I mean, a lot of what I do is kind of math. You know what I mean? It's like it's like this goes here and this goes, you know, it's building blocks that could build something. And even as a guitar player, like I said, like I just learned too much and to the point where like I had to try to unlearn it and play by feel. But there's still times when, like, when writing, it's like hard for me to write sometimes because I'm like that, because it's hard for me to let go of, well, this chord doesn't go with that chord. Well, sure it does. If you make it go, like if you play it together, it does. Like no matter what it is. If you play a chord next to another chord, no matter what they are, that's the way it is now. Like, but it's really hard to let go sometimes.
Dude, that's so funny you brought that up, because I had a situation with that where I was playing with these guys, and they're all like great musicians, and they're like, they know music really fucking well.
Right.
And we were doing something, and someone came up with an idea for this thing, and we're working out kind of this part. And a couple of the people who are like the fucking nerds, who are like, and they're amazing musicians,
Yeah,
like
sure.
they're insane, but they like couldn't get over it was a thing. It was like, oh, but you can't do that. And I remember, and it was funny, and again, being like the drummer who also doesn't know any music,
Right.
and being like, the thing that's like, well, I mean, actually, you fucking can.
Yeah.
I was like, if it sounds good, and it's like, and it was that thing of like, dude, yeah, but you don't know music, like you don't know that, and it's like a thing. You're like, well,
neither does anybody who enjoys music.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, exactly. And it's like, but the thing is it doesn't. Yeah, like going back, it doesn't matter. What matters is if it's like, well, if that's the note if that's what he played, and that's what I heard, and it sounded good, then it fucking worked.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna have to get over that one, and it's
that's a tough one for people.
Yeah.
I get it. But I just got to always try to approach everything consciously as the person who's never heard it before. If it's a mix, if it's a song, if it's a production, like, got to try to remove yourself from the equation as much as possible and think about, I've mixed thousands of songs, and I do this every single day. And today I might have mixed 2 songs. But so these people, like, they don't do that every day. They're never, like, they don't know. The listener is going to hear the song for the first time. What's going to draw them in? What's going to be the thing?
Yeah.
It's not going to be some fucking cool plugin. You know what I mean? It's not going to be some fucking trick, that I've done. Oh, I did this cool, like, no, it's like, what's going to feel good to the person who's never heard it before.
Yeah.
It's not, they don't give a shit what you used to get there.
Yeah.
And, songs are the same, songwriting's the same way. And the more you can remove yourself from the equation, the better the music's going to be, I think.
Yeah.
Or any art is going to be.
And especially going back to what you said earlier, for artists, that's like the hardest thing. It's like, again, going back to the romantic, like, everything wants to be romanticized, and ultimately it comes down to it. It's like caught in this tension of the artist who's creating the music, juggling this thing of like, well, this is for me. And you're like, yes, but if it was really just for you, you would have just left it for you. You know what I mean? We wouldn't be sitting here
talking about it
and recording it so you could put it on the fucking internet for everyone else. And it's like that at some point in time, you have to understand that, like, that if that's what you're doing, like, unless someone's asking you to compromise something that's off the wall, but at the end of the day, like, if that's what your goal is, you're putting this out for someone else to listen to. Yeah. Otherwise, you would have just fucking kept it the guitar song that it was, just with you in your bedroom.
I mean, it's a lot to juggle.
Yeah.
It's a lot to sort of, as an artist, you want to express yourself. Yeah. You want your vision of your art to be true to you and your own expression, yourself. But you do have to think about your audience. I mean, and your audience changes everything. It's the same thing they say about photographs. As soon as you take a picture of something, it changes it. Yeah. And that's true of recording and writing and everything else. Like, as soon as you decide to capture something, it's that way forever. It's like it no longer just a snapshot of that thing. But I also, I think I try to encourage people to not care so much. Like, like it's a snapshot in time. It's not like you re-record the same song 8 times if you want to. Right. As it evolves. Like, if the song, like, I hear people all the time, like, oh man, I wish after I played that song for 2 years, like, it evolved into this whole thing. I wish I'd recorded it. Like, go ahead. Yep. Like, who cares? Like, it's your song. Yeah. Capture another moment. And if it's a better moment, people will be like, oh, that's awesome. People get too precious about, I mean, I know it's expensive. Recording is expensive, so that's why they're precious about it. And they do it so infrequently. But it's becoming easier and easier to do, you know, you set up a studio in your house and just record stuff. And yeah, I think being precious about shit, it's just kills the inspiration out of it and kills the art.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
just have it be a moment in time and let it go, and then have another
Yeah.
one. You know, it's not. It's just one moment.
Yeah.
You want it to be the best it can for that moment, but then yeah, if you're not evolving, if you don't think it could have been done better a year from there, then quit.
Yeah.
Like because you're supposed to.
Yeah.
You know, I mixes I did 2 weeks ago. I think, fuck, I wish I figured something out that would have been better for that in those 2 weeks. But, you know, it's gone.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, I view that as a positive thing. Like that's constantly wanting to do better. I want to make everything I do, I want it to be the best I've done to that point. So you just have to keep sort of pushing yourself, but that also means letting it go or you go insane. You have to let stuff go and be like, that was then. And this is now, and this is a different thing. And I just think create things and put them in the world and then create more things. And don't, you know, like if you're a creator, that's what you do.
Yeah.
You know, I just like to encourage people all the time. Just like, let it go. Just do it. Let it go.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely have had clients that work 2 years on a record. And I'm like, do you even remember why you wanted to do this in the first place? And they're miserable. And they're just like, it's never going to be right. I'm like, no, you're right.
Yeah.
You have to sort of, I think it's sort of the responsibility as a public artist to just let it go and let it have its own life. You know, 'cause you've birthed this little thing, like let it go.
Well, it's just
into the
also
world to do its own thing.
holding you back from being able to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, to evolve
You're
into
like
whatever.
stuck in fucking purgatory.
Yeah,
That's what it feels like when you're working on a record for
It
that
does.
long. It feels like fucking purgatory.
it does, and it is. It's yeah. I think. I mean, some brilliant fucking records have been made over a long period of time.
Yeah.
So there's no rules, and I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about all the time. But I'm I'm not the authority on anything.
Yeah.
I just know for me, it's like, the more I do this, the more I'm like, just make stuff and put it out.
Mm-hmm.
Please, everybody, just do more.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and people worry about this, you know, if you're really worried that like you're not going to write any better songs than this, then, you know, are you a songwriter or are you a person that's written one album?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
just write another one. It'll come. It'll be great. Like, and you'll evolve one way or the other. If one person doesn't think it's as good as the last shit, then it doesn't matter as long as you think you're getting better.
Yeah. Man. It's a lot.
It's a lot. This business is a lot.
Yeah.
This business of making music is a lot to take in.
It is. And it's I mean, it's funny is I feel what I love is that you know, a lot of my listeners are like, I have a lot of obviously friends who aren't all musicians.
Yeah.
And don't have zero idea of what this process is like. And I've been loving hearing feedback from people who enjoy music but they have no idea that this is what it takes to create an album or create a song or any of those things. No big deal. My beer's just foaming literally all over me. And my paint opener, which I've been using as a bottle opener,
it's failing.
Only half working.
I had some trouble with it.
Yeah, so it's no big deal. If I get pulled over later, they'll be like, "You smell like booze." Yeah. Well, I'll be like, well, that's because it's on my pants.
Should have smelled me earlier.
Yeah. But I love going into some of these things, and I think that for so many people who are obviously into music and just the ability to bring people into that world. And I have a lot of friends, like I'm sure some of my friends get fucking tired of hearing about it. You know, it's because it's like that happens to be the world that I'm in. And so when we're talking about things, it's like, you know, I could talk about for days about stuff's going on and stuff, but it is such like a deep dark hole that I feel like artists can get lost in, and it's overwhelming because it's like, everyone just thinks that you fucking come up with a song, and then it's like, and the next thing they know, they're able to hear it on Spotify, and they don't understand, like, all the rehearsals that went on and before they went to the studio, and how much money they spent to go be in a studio and to feel and hear the fucking clock ticking, and like, and all those things, and the process of like having to commit to us, like, when you're sending a mix and you're getting it, and like, oh my God, we got to commit to that. Like, if we
at some point, this has to be finished.
And juggling that thing, and like, and which also costs money, and then, and then it goes to mastering, and then that also costs money, and now I got to reapprove another approval of the other thing we approved, and it's like, just so we can fucking have something to give people,
Yeah. And then there's the inevitable, like, all this buildup, and then you release a record, and then a week later you're like fucking depressed because you're like, what am I going to do with myself? Like, my entire life was revolved around this one thing, and now it's done.
And a year later you're like, oh, 2,000 people listened to it.
Yeah.
If or you're lucky. More like it had 2,000 listens, which was probably like 20 people listened to it.
Yeah. 100 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
Yeah.
This whole thing is like, but it's just in your blood, and you have to, like, one of those things that, I mean, it's art,
Yeah.
It's like you're
a slave to it to a degree.
You're a slave to it. You have to get it out, and you have to suffer for it often. And that's what makes it great.
Yeah.
Usually, that's the suffering is what makes it better.
Yeah.
If it was easy, everybody would do it.
That's true.
Then, I mean, now it does seem like everybody does.
I was just going to say that. I was like,
it does seem like, now that you can do it in your phone, everybody's doing it.
That just came full circle.
It did. It totally did. In other words, like, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. It's all so fucked, good. And we're all just chasing our tails.
Yeah.
But I don't know, we love it. That's why we keep doing it.
Yeah.
I love that whole process.
Yeah.
And I love thinking about that person, like that friend of yours that doesn't do music but loves music. It's like, that's who I'm thinking about hearing stuff most of the time. It's like that person that's like, they're not judging the length of my reverb tail. They're not, they're experiencing it. They're listening to how it feels for them, and if it has some sort of emotion or anything.
Yeah.
If you don't constantly remind yourself of that, I think then you're going to get lost down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I think better records are made when you can kind of let go.
So what's like your dream record to make? Like, man. What is that like? What is it that if you could be doing every day, like, what would be your ideal situation?
I mean, that's a tough one. Because like every other person, I'm never satisfied with just one thing. But I mean, I love mixing, and that's what I'm doing most. Like, my main career right now is just mixing records. And I do love that, and I want to continue doing that. It's just sort of reaching. I mean, I love all the shit that Dave Cobb is doing. I mean, personally, I love country music, and I love I love songwriters, really. Like, I just love great songs, and I feel like what he's doing, like, inevitably, just every fucking project comes out of that guy is like chock full of amazing songs and amazing moments that are captured. So I'd love to mix those kinds of records that are just like great stories and great moments captured, and just be a part of that sort of telling of that story.
Yeah.
And not specifically his, but just that, that kind, that sort of, I just want to be a part of really great songs.
Yeah.
And be able to take those pieces and put them together in a way that.
But mixing is where you would.
I think so. I think that's where I see myself continuing to go. Yeah. I love producing.
Right.
I've kind of refound my love for producing after not really, You know, I'm
even like the
producing
recording
Ellis's record
process.
now, like the Ellis Bryant.
Yeah.
I'm producing his record now, and I'm loving that process. We're taking our time on it, and it just, you know, that's a record that I feel really strongly about, and
Yeah.
I'm really connected to. The songs are great, and so I would love to keep doing that, but it has to be, you know, I sort of made up my mind, like, I have to really love a project and a record to want to produce it, because
Yeah.
it is a ton of work, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of, so I would love to be in a position to be able to choose those kinds of records and do more of that.
Yeah.
But that's something that's like, okay, well, that I'm not sure how to pursue that as a career, as like, I mean, other than just keeping my ears open and always finding artists that I really believe in, and finding artists that, you know, who have stories I want to be a part of telling. But I think mixing for me is like, that's my career move, and to try to continue to move up into sort of better and better. It's really not even about like, there's nothing greater for me than working on something that I also love listening to. Mm-hmm. And when I get done with it, still want to listen to it.
Yeah.
And still want to, like, there's a few records that I've mixed that I still want to, like, that I put on and want to listen to as a listener.
Yeah.
That's amazing to me. Like, I got to be a part of making that, and I can be really proud of it on a different level, but also I can really enjoy listening to it.
Yeah.
And
you'd prefer to do that just strictly from the mixing, as opposed to doing the engineering and then mixing? I mean, is that...
I do, yeah. I think I still really enjoy engineering, and I still really enjoy, like, getting in a room with a band and recording and making it sound great. But I think the mixing part of it, to me, is a little bit more rewarding, just because of the, again, this sort of the instant gratification part of it, like the process for me, starting with this blank canvas and these puzzle pieces and putting it together and having it come together as a finished song. I just love that process so much. It just really, so I think I prefer doing that. The engineering process is, there's a lot of, you're still a long way from the end. You know, when you get in a room with a band, you're a ways away from getting to sit back and enjoy it and listen to it and go, we did that. Like, that's awesome. It's still super gratifying, but it's not the same.
That's something similar that Pete said. He kind of mentioned that he's like, because he started off as was engineering these records, and he's like, at a certain time, being stuck with a band till like 2 a.m. in a studio was like not what I wanted to do. Yeah. And he's like, I just kind of let go of that side. And it was like, I just started focusing on, like, I really love this thing.
Yeah. And I think there's a certain amount of, it's not as challenging anymore for me as it once was. So I know I can go into a studio like Singing Serpent or any studio with a band, and I know how to record. I know I can make it sound good, and I know that there's less creative choices, there's less interpretation. It's just like, capture that. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes there's cool shit that comes up. Sometimes it's like, well, capture that, but make it cool sounding, or make, like, put a friggin' funnel inside the piano and put a mic at the other end of a hose or whatever, doing weird shit can be really fun and discovering new sounds. But for the most part,
more often than not, you don't have the time to do that.
No. And everyone's looking at their watch like, fuck, we're paying by the hour. Like, what are you, like, we're not going to wait around for you to,
why you have a garden hose in here?
Yeah. What the fuck are you doing? So I often don't get the luxury of being able to experiment with sound. So you go in, and then largely you're just waiting for them to get the take they like, and you're trying to help encourage that, but sometimes it's pulling teeth. And yes, I think I'll always still do all of it a little bit. I'll still engineer, but it's just the way things are going. I'm doing a lot less of it, and enjoying that. Plus, I get to mix in my underwear if I want to. Like, I'm mixing at home, and like, having a studio at my house has been like the biggest game changer.
Yeah.
Of like being able to. I mean, I have kids and I have a life outside of that, so it's like being able to make my own schedule and go, okay, I can take 2 hours off now and hang out with my kids and do something, or go do, hang out or go see a friend play or do whatever.
Yeah.
And then come back to something is a huge luxury. And
Yeah.
and I love that.
Yeah.
I love being able to just, I still have deadlines and I still have tons of, sometimes I have to pull all-nighters and get shit done at home, but it's like, it's a lot different when you can take a break and go into your own fridge and pull out a snack and, and see your family and hang out in your own environment than it is like being in a studio and being somewhere that's like, no matter how used to, even at Lost Ark, I was there for so long and I was there every single day, but it was like, it was never home.
Yeah.
You're never that comfortable. And you're always still like, man, I just want to go lay in my own bed and just, or just sit on my own couch and watch something for, like, sometimes I'm just like, I get to something, I need a break. Yeah. I just need either an ear break, or I'm just like, this isn't, I'm hitting a wall here.
Yeah.
This isn't happening. It's not coming together. I'm just going to go watch something stupid for an hour and come back to it.
Yeah.
That part's amazing.
That's rad. That's ideal.
I'm super lucky that I get to do that.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, shit. I'll be seeing you in a couple of weeks with Kimmy. So.
I know, that's awesome. It's gonna be great.
Yeah,
as I was just saying, like, no, tracking sucks. Oh yeah, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. It's gonna be great.
I thought about that as you're like kind of answer. I was like, wow, I hope he didn't feel like I just backed him into a corner.
No, like, not at all. I think every situation is different, and especially like I love working with friends.
Yeah,
it's so much more fun when you're in a room with a bunch of friends, and like this will be third or fourth time probably I've worked with Kimmy on something, and it's working with you. Like, I know everybody in the band. Everybody's super cool. They're all friends. So
yeah,
that's a totally different thing.
Totally
and just
different.
like going into with a band you don't know and doing something different. And I'm lucky enough, like most of the times I'm in the studio now, it's with repeat clients. People I've worked with before that I've built a relationship with. So that makes it way better.
Yeah.
I think if I moved to a new town, didn't know anybody, and was just like engineering every single day, I probably wouldn't dig it.
Yeah. And do you see yourself staying put?
No.
I
mean, for a while. I mean, my kids are in school, and this is sort of like I'm here for a while.
I heard that's a thing with parents. So
yeah, it is. Yeah, you don't want to disrupt their lives, but they're but no, I mean, I like San Diego a lot, and I've definitely built a lot of incredible friendships and relationships here. But it's not, I've never necessarily felt like California in general. I mean, I've been here for 22 years.
Yeah.
But I never really felt like home. And not that, even where I grew up would be home. I don't know. It's a big world, and I feel like the possibilities are a lot more than just a county.
Yeah, for sure.
So I definitely have my sights on eventually finding a place. Yeah. That's the other thing about mixing that's cool. Is like,
you do it anywhere.
I can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's a real freedom to feel that, to go like, let's pack it up. Let's try somewhere else. Let's do something. Let's be in an environment that's inspiring to try to make something inspiring.
Well, and that's the ability to, and I also explained to you like some stuff we're doing in our kind of personal situation too, but man, like freedom is everything.
Yeah.
And so, if focusing in on going like, okay, well, if I can do more mixing, I don't have to be strapped to anywhere.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And like once you get to a spot where like, okay, like I'm in a spot where at any moment I could pick up and I can say yes, something comes up, or I can just go.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal, to get to that point. I mean, I'm pretty close to that, but I wouldn't go yet. I mean, I feel like I've, I'll be here for 5 or 6 years easy.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I mean, I think about living abroad. I think about living in Scotland all the time,
Oh, really?
and just trying a different life,
Yeah.
or different. It's not you're not, especially with everything going on in this fucking dumpster
Yeah.
fire of a country right now. That I just feel like maybe I'll try somewhere else for a while. Maybe that'd be cool.
I feel like that's what everyone's doing with California.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a thing where everyone's kind of.
As I get older too, and
yeah.
I think about like buying a home and like
Yeah.
doing stuff like fuck, man, how does anybody do it here in Southern California?
Yeah.
Like everything is so ridiculously expensive, and if I could, there's a million places I could go that are beautiful, and I would love that I could live like a king
Mm-hmm.
with what I make, where I'm scraping here. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's one of those things where it's like
that's
I might want to think about some more comfort in my grayer years.
And it's not like it used to be. It's like it's crazy how many places that I've been, and I'm like, man, this isn't like there's so many cool places and like rad music
Yeah,
spots or like rad breweries or all the things that like
everywhere.
I feel like when I was a kid, I used to go to Texas, and I mean, don't get me wrong, where I used to go to Texas, it's still fucking pretty shitty. But even then, it's like things have just changed, and there's so many cool places that have things to offer. Where I felt like when I was growing up, it felt like everywhere else just sucked in comparison to being in Southern California.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely an allure and a draw to LA and to Southern California that I think the playing field is leveled out quite a bit.
Quality of life is a thing.
Definitely is a thing. But for the time being, I love it.
Yeah.
And I love the people and my friendships, and I'm perfectly happy being here for now.
Yeah.
But I think I've never felt like a permanence.
Sure.
Even though I've been in places for decades, like I've never felt like there was a permanence to it. So.
I'm kind of the opposite. I always felt like, I was like, I was pretty certain that I would forever. I was like, I never need to leave Oceanside.
It's pretty amazing.
I love it.
Yeah.
It is. I really do. I mean, it's one of those things I absolutely love it, which is probably why we haven't left yet.
Yeah.
And I love the community and the relationships I've built and the circle of people that I found myself, all the things, and all the weather, all of everything, all those things are obviously huge factors. And the idea of being anywhere else has literally terrified me my whole life.
Oh yeah,
and it's
I have moved at the drop of a hat across the country so many times.
I always envy that because I'm like, I admire people that can like just do that, because it's like,
I mean, I think it's too, it's childhood and everything. Like we moved around a ton when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I never really felt like a sense of permanence.
Yeah.
But all in New England. Like I grew up in Vermont and New Hampshire. And
oh no, my wife's from New Hampshire.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
My mom's still there.
No way.
But we moved around a ton when I was living from town to town,
Yeah.
And I think that just sort of like made the idea of home not a permanent thing. Like, well, I think if you grow up in a house with your family's been there, and it's sort of an established town with some history there, then it's different. But,
yeah.
I mean, sometimes the grass is always greener. Sometimes I wish that I could just want to have a home that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to die here. Like, I'm just going to live here and be happy and die. But yeah, I feel like there's always something else calling me.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing to have.
Well,
I mean,
I hope so.
It's better. I mean, it's better.
It's one way to go about
nothing's calling me. Imagine feeling that, feeling like I'm called to nothing.
Nope. Yeah. Yeah. Dude.
Yeah. Cool. We could wrap it up. I think we've probably hit at least a 2-hour mark, and I don't want to fucking drive people to.
Yeah, you can edit down all the boring shit.
No, we don't edit.
Well, thanks, man.
Yeah, I appreciate
I loved it.
you.
It's fun.
Yeah,
fun to get to just hang out with you.
Absolutely. That's why I say this is the best part.
Yeah.
It's just having these things on is just I don't know. perk for later.
Yeah.
Like a placeholder.
Yeah, you forget about it after a while.
It's cool.
All
All right. Sweet.
Thanks, man.